It seems there's a guidebook for everything under the sun. How to do this, how to do that. But how do you fall in love and make sure you don't end up with a broken heart? Here's a show that's going to walk you through all the things you ought to know. Yes, it's all about the love situation. It is a heart to heart with Dr. Chris Hart next as we live out loud. Hello and welcome to Sheila Lives Out Loud. So glad you're tuned in and you're watching. I hope you've clicked subscribe to this channel. If you haven't, there is still time and room for a small one, so go ahead. You know you wanna. And remember to click on notifications so you never miss an episode of the show. Today, it's all about a heart-to-heart with Dr. Chris Hart, and we're going to walk through all the things you should look out for before you fall in love. Although I'm not quite sure it's possible to look out for things when you're falling in love because you're falling and your heels are in the air and your hands are over here and your head's in the clouds. Can you really look out for things, Doctor?
Yes, you should. In fact, the best advice you can give anybody who's looking for a serious relationship is to do the first things in the cold light of day, stone cold sober, so that you're actually just having a conversation with someone, even if you like the look of them, but you're still alert, you're still, firing
You're present.
you're still firing on all four cylinders before you actually really tumble. The moment you really started to tumble,
Right.
It is too late.
Okay. Now, in talking about before you fall in love, we've got to be cognizant of the fact that love is a very chemical thing because there's some people you look at and there's nothing that happens, there's no attraction, absolutely zip. And then 5 years down the line, somehow you got married to this person and you've got 10 children and you can't quite tell where it happened. Then on the other side, there are people who walk into a room and everything stops. So I think we begin with looking at the crazy because I think there's a lot more crazy that happens in relationships like that than in the ones that take a lot of time to develop and mature.
Yeah.
When there's this instant attraction, how
Yes.
do you keep your eyes open?
Well, it's not easy. I mean, if you really do feel that love at first sight thing, I mean, obviously for a little while at least, you're not actually going to be performing too well. And I suppose you just have to let it be, you just be carried along by it for a short while. But you're still going to have to get out the checklist and make quite sure that everything's okay before you get really committed. It's one thing to feel in love, a real crush. It's another thing to, sign the register. You
Say, I do,
Yeah, absolutely.
when you really don't.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's get back to that checklist, the things that you should be looking out for.
Well, the first and the most basic is that you're telling one another the truth. You actually feel okay saying to this other person things that are true about yourself without any reservations. You're actually being yourself. And you're describing your job, your real one, not the
dream one.
hallucination.
Yes.
And so on. And you've got a really strong feeling that this person's doing the same to you. Now, I would stop any relationship stone dead in its tracks if I felt that there wasn't honesty going on. Now, of course, after you've got the honesty, you start ratcheting up the things that must be present. Like, the girl must have the right sort of background, the man must have a job, he must be earning, he must be the sort of guy you'd trust to pay the mortgage. You
Right.
just have to assess those things.
Doctor, honesty is important
Yeah.
in all things. There's no running away from this thing. But it's very hard to get into very personal and private conversations with somebody the moment that you meet them.
Oh yes, absolutely.
There's-
You don't in practice.
Right.
I mean, you meet somebody, heaven knows what the circumstances are, but it's usually pretty brief. The advice that you give to young men is get the phone number, get the hell out of here, because from that moment on, you're probably going to put your foot in it.
Right.
So a little negotiation occurs and you have the first meeting. Now, the first meeting is the critical one. And if you're wise, you make it a stone cold sober, broad daylight thing, the coffee shop. And you just start to chat. And I hate to say it, but you start with really basic things, where do you work? Tell me about your job. I mean, you're really trying to suss each other out. Are you real people, with an income? You can afford a mortgage. It's those sorts of questions. you move on to a little bit of, oh, I know it sounds awful, but you say, and where does your girlfriend work? You're just checking whether they've really got one.
Right.
Because when you're stone cold sober, you'll generally admit to things like that. You want a little bit of the relationship history. What happened to the previous girlfriend? You didn't have one, didn't you? Because if you're talking to a loner, you're beginning to think,
So why isn't anybody interested in you? What exactly is wrong with you?
yes, exactly. So you try and pick these things up, and
Yeah.
it's just a nice, relaxed conversation. And hopefully it goes on a little while, and you have a couple of cups of coffee, and all the things come up, tick, 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 in the
At that point.
checklist.
But in saying that there's a checklist, it's not that you go there with a full scarf and a writing pad and you're writing all these things down. It's not an inquisition. It's
No.
conversation.
Yes, it's conversation.
It's saying,
It's
this is who
pleasant.
I am, this is what I like, and this is where I'm going.
Yes.
And this is who you are, this is what you like, and
Yeah.
this is where you're going.
You're also, of course, not just listening to the words, you're watching the behaviours. I mean, does this guy know which fork and spoon to use? And how does he treat the waiter? And is he just a little bit abrupt with them and he's quite nice to you? Well, the way he treats the waiters, how he's going to treat you in 6 months' time.
Really? Is that an established fact?
Oh, yes, absolutely. If you are uncomfortable with the way your new friend is treating the people around him, interacting with the guy who just jostles into him and stuff like that, then obviously there's something wrong. So you must be comfortable with stuff like that.
Looking at relationships 101 in the digital age, Facebook, Instagram, people are snapping and
Yeah.
talking about everything and putting it online. At what point do you start bringing that part of your life with this new person? And when do you start uploading it? Is there a good time to do it? Or is it it's just as you live your life, so keep going?
It depends what you say, really. I mean, if you put a photo of somebody you meet on Facebook, what does it matter? But if you start describing them as your girlfriend or something like that, that's really a bit weird.
I'm in a relationship
Yes,
now.
yes, change your
Tomorrow
status.
it's complicated.
Don't go there. Just yes, by all means, stream of consciousness stuff, but keep
Yeah.
it very simple to begin with. Because I mean, right at the beginning, there is no relationship. There is just an interesting conversation, and you have to take it through a stage of looking one another in the eye and saying, "The next time we meet, is that going to be a date? Date."
Will it be a date or another coffee? Let's be very clear what this will be.
You need to say that word and say it with a twinkle in your eye, saying that if we are dating, that's the start of a relationship, and
Yeah.
we're doing this in a slightly different way. And of course, one of the things you're looking for is that the person you're with knows how to date, knows that there's a difference between hanging out and dating,
Right.
knows that it's done properly and it's more polite and it's more structured, and we all know who pays and little details like that.
Okay.
And if we can get past those hurdles, and we're still talking the truth, and it's really sounding real, like you describe your friends and your family, and they're three-dimensional, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Then, of course, you get to this magic day when you look at one another and we say, are we an item? Is this gone a little bit further than just
Then
dating?
dating. And this is now the big C, the commitment, is it
Yes,
not?
you are making the first steps towards a commitment. And it's actually very important that you do. A lot of relationships get into trouble because they are undefined. It's not clear whether this is, booty calls or just hanging about.
Friends
or-
with benefits. What exactly are we here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to actually say, hang on, we're an item, aren't we? We're going to start telling people that we are boyfriend, girlfriend. And that comes with certain changes, like you should start talking about being exclusive. I don't want to see you with anybody else anymore. Maybe you even need to be clear about what that means. You're not trying to be controlling, but if I see you, endlessly doing this, I'm going to start getting suspicious and want to know what is going on.
Exactly. You've talked about friends and describing meeting friends and family. At what point is it prudent to start meeting people? Because I know people who say, why don't you come to my house and meet my family? And that's the first date. And then there are those who just will not disclose information. Yes,
Right.
they've got family. Yes, they've
Yeah.
got friends, but you don't know them. You don't even know how to start tracking them. At what point is it prudent to start asking about
Well,
meeting these other people?
Very early, actually. I mean, family is a little bit different. I mean, the core family, parents, immediate uncles and things like that. you actually meet those quite late. But the cousins, the people you hang out with, you should start meeting those at the same time as you meet each other's friends. And you should start meeting each other's friends almost from day one. Because actually, your friends tell me a lot about you. And so if I don't know your friends and I just know you in a vacuum, I've got the right to assume that your friends are not very nice people. And they're going to cause a lot of trouble
A lot
to
of
us.
trouble.
Yeah. So I do need to know them.
Yeah.
So some of our early dates have got to be hangouts with the group, or at least you've got to walk over to them in the bar and introduce one another and get to know nicely. You know, it's not nothing silly, but if I don't know who your friends are, then I don't really know you.
Yeah.
The family, that's, I'm afraid, rather more formal. And so you leave that until quite a long way down the path. The point where you've actually realized that not only are you an item, but you're a serious item. This is starting to morph from being a dating relationship into something where you're beginning to ask, is this it? And it's only then that you really start introducing the families.
Okay.
The moment that starts to happen, though, it should start to get quite nice.
The road gets a lot smoother.
It should do. And I mean, if you instantly detect that there's something very odd about this family, well, that's going to put a real dampener on things, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Okay. All right. Talking about money, because money is a sore issue. It brings out the best and it brings out the worst in all of us. At what point is this conversation about money put on the table?
Right. Right at the very beginning, there should be some very simple assumptions going along. I mean, it should be assumed that the guy picks up all the tabs. But the girl should start doing some small and nice things just to make quite sure he knows she's not a freeloader. You know, she should start picking up the tab for the coffee sometimes or paying for the cab. And just little things that say, I have got some money and I do know how it works. But round about 3 to 6 months, you should start thinking of money as yours, ours, rather than yours and mine. And you should almost be budgeting together for the dates and start discussing in some detail what your plans are for the future, what your expectations are, all in terms of money.
Yeah.
You don't actually need to mention the numbers yet, but you start saying things like, I want to go back to school and do this, because it's got monetary implications. You start being very familiar with each other's money. You know how much each other's earning, and you know what you're saving and all the rest of it. And what's all that's leading up to is that in the last few months before a wedding, you actually have to create the financial system for your marriage. I don't actually care what it is, but you've got to agree it, and it's got to be something you're doing together. And there definitely mustn't be any secrets. You know, like if I've got swinging loans off somewhere that I can barely afford,
Yeah.
I need to get it on the table. If I've got plans, if I'm saving and scrimping to do something, you need to know all about it.
So these are the things, the building blocks for what happens going towards commitment
Yeah.
and marriage
Yeah.
and that elusive happily ever after.
Yes.
Does it even exist, Doctor?
What, happily ever after?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. If you really have got the basics in place, I mean, the simple things, you're truthful, you actually do spend a lot of time together. And that doesn't need to be ridiculous, but you know what I mean? You know each other very well. You do all the sort of normal, simple things together. You've developed a few nice habits, like assuming you've got past the point of living together and all the rest of it, you actually go to bed together at the same time, and nice little things like that.
Right.
You've nailed the money. You've really understood how you're going to live as a couple.
Okay.
And you've begun to talk about things like children. Are we having children? When are we having children? Where are we going to live? What do we anticipate happening in our careers? This is all becoming shared knowledge. Now, if you've done all that and you've got married and it continues after marriage, then it's going to be very happy.
So there are no surprises that are happening after the big day.
That's the critical
Everything
thing.
has been laid out from the get-go.
Yes, that's
Okay.
basically it. There is always, of course, one big surprise that everybody doesn't expect. When you get married, expectations change. And so you actually have to incorporate those changes. I mean, for example, well, to a first approximation, you have to change all your friends when you get married. You cannot hang out with single people when you're a married
Really?
person. Yeah.
I've always had issues with that. Why can't you, Doctor?
Well, of course, when I say you change your friends, what I really mean is you start behaving like a married couple. Now, if your habit is to go out 5 nights a week till 4 a.m., drinking in all the most sordid bars in
But
town.
those are not my habits.
No, I know, but if they are, I absolutely guarantee that this will not be a happy marriage.
Yeah.
So those sorts of habits have to morph into something which is more couple-friendly. In other words, you have to hang out more with people who are married. And when I say married, I mean genuinely married. There's an awful lot of people in this world who have got marriage certificates but are still single. They behave like single people, females as well as males.
As well as males,
That's
yeah.
not a recipe for a happy marriage.
So, Doctor, there's something you've talked about, and
Mm-hmm.
it's crucial that we look at this element because it's the source of a lot of distress.
Yes.
Expectations.
Yes.
We walk in with such grand expectations. Some of us are walking into the relationships expecting things are going to stay just as because,
Yeah.
woohoo, it's working for me. And then for somebody else, it's, well,
Yeah.
you are going to be the most perfect being when I'm done with you. So let's talk about managing and setting those expectations. Are these part of the things we put on the table from the beginning?
Yes, I think right from the outset, just as part of the general conversation, you should be talking about what you expect to happen in your life. And of course, that includes how you interact with your partner. So some people, for example, have got very clear ideas about roles in marriage. They expect the man to behave like this and the woman to behave like this. Others have got a different set of ideas about that. It's very important to get those on the table and to be comfortable with them. You know, I mean, if you're a modern feminist, liberated, and he's, from the backwoods, there are going to be a few sparks.
Yeah.
And you'd better lay all that out and agree how it's going to work and be doing it for months before you're married. The last few months before a wedding should actually be a sort of dry run. You should actually be living as if you were married. And so you've actually begun to see those expectations in action. Unfortunately, they still change a bit further when literally you come back from the honeymoon. People, I don't know what it is about that wedding thing. It definitely changes people. And so, for example, women have a tendency to get more controlling in the house. My brand of sugar, no argument, you know.
Right.
And you need to be okay with that or deal with it. It's pretty likely that you're going to expect some social changes.
Next question for me is the big C. You've fallen in love. This
Yep.
looks like the person. You're thinking at some point, if he proposes, it's a definite yes. But understanding commitment. Commitment, there's a friend of mine who believes that the relationship springs from, as of today, you and I are now in a committed relationship, and so we start doing things as a couple. But isn't commitment one of those things you work towards? Understanding commitment, Doctor, because we're
Okay.
about to wrap up right now and continue with this conversation in a moment. But commitment, what the heck is this thing?
Right. Unfortunately, if it's not talked about, commitment can be a real issue. I mean, relationships often start with very different ideas about what people are aiming for. Some people say, I'm in this for a casual relationship. The other one thinks they're getting married. You mustn't let that persist. You've actually got to start talking about what you're doing in that relationship. So even the very first conversations where you start saying things like, we're dating, that expresses a degree of commitment. Later on, when you say, we're an item, and I want us to be exclusive, that's another level of commitment. Later on, perhaps you define what you mean by exclusive. That's another layer of commitment. Later on, you start talking about money and family. You only do those as an expression of commitment. But then, of course, you come to the real crunch. Are we going to stay in this as some sort of undefined relationship, or are we going to turn it into a marriage or whatever? You must have that conversation. And it's pretty important to have it fairly early, like no later than about a year to a year and a half. You get a lot of people who, you know, you hear the girls moaning at the bar, you know, that we've been going out for 4 years and it's just not, he's not proposing. And one of the reasons why you must have the conversation is that men generally don't propose unless somebody says they should. So unless the girl is saying, now, where is this relationship going? You know, what are we going to be doing in a few months' time? Isn't it about time we started talking to the family about this and that?
Right.
If you don't have conversations like that, he doesn't actually think about proposing. He absolutely won't propose unless he's completely confident you're going to say yes. For example, I know that sounds stupid.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So it has to be clear that you do intend to say yes. And it is what you want.
so either one of two things is going to happen. You will get what you want as a woman. He will propose, or he's going to run for the hills if he's not in it for the long haul.
Absolutely. And you want to know that
As soon as possible.
as soon as possible.
All right, so when's the right time to propose and what happens after the proposal? I think we're going to spare that conversation to part 2 of this episode. Please stay with us. Watch out for part 2. Coming up soon, remember you can have a conversation with Dr. Hart. It's always called a heart-to-heart on Sheila Lives Out Loud. So send us those questions and issues that you're going through so we can talk to the good doctor about that. But for now, it's Live Out Loud no matter what you do, no matter where you are. We are at Westwood Hotel. Looking forward to continuing with this conversation in part 2.